Welcome to another week of Overwatch 2 questions from the Overwatch University subreddit. Top upvoted, here we go. First question is, why is Symmetra being viable a problem now? Genuinely curious, I saw someone say that she has been bad for so long that no one knows how to play against a viable sim. Her turrets literally don't move. All you gotta do is shoot them, right? Like, is it a pride thing? Was she a throw pick for so long that losing to her feels that much worse? How do people complain about having doo-doo butt sim on their team and then 180 to complaining about having a Symmetra that would be good on their team? All in all, I personally think that it comes down to a self-awareness issue. It sounds to me like an anecdotal thing. I don't think sim being viable is a problem. Sim, when popping off, can feel frustrating to play with, or against, excuse me, but that doesn't even exist just for Symmetra. There's a lot of hero and ability styles that people just don't like playing against, like Torb turrets, literally deployables, like walking into a Junkrat trap, Torbjorn turrets, Symmetra turrets, anything that's sort of like annoying and not conventionally an FPS kind of style or ability frustrates people, and their voices tend to be a little bit louder. No, she wasn't a throw pick for so long that she feels much worse. To answer that second part, she's always been quite decent on very specific maps and very specific niches, but that's just her design. She's designed to pretty much be a niche pick no matter what. And as of the recording of this video, she just got nerfed again today, where they reverted her beam DPS damage, which I don't actually agree with. I think it's fine for a ramp up. And they made the Symmetra turrets go down from 50 HP to 40 HP, which means they're meleeable again, and that's a pretty big nerf to her. All in all, I don't think her being viable is a problem at all. Sounds very limited to your experience and just like a vocal minority, if you will. Next, would you rather have a weak tank, weak DPS, or weak support? Ooh, that's a good question. In this scenario, you know one of your team's role is lacking. Which is preferable? As a tank player, I honestly think I would rather have bad supports than bad DPS. Good DPS have a tendency to play around the problem. I go Zarya, they go Soldier or Mei, and we get by. But with bad DPS, I often find good support simply can't offset the lost damage at all. They can run Bat more or whatever, but supports just can't kill confirm enough to make it matter. Obviously, you can't settle for a bad tank because then nobody gets any space, but bad supports are still like going to contribute at least a little bit, whereas bad DPS will literally provide nothing at all, like a Battle Lucio is still doing damage, at least. Good question. For me personally, I would much rather have a weak support line. I'm a support player. If I'm the weakest link, it's not as noticeable because the thing with being a support is that you can always contribute. You always have someone to shoot or heal for the most part. If you just play the game naturally, you have somebody in front of you to at least press a button and hopefully top them off. But if you're a DPS and you don't know how to take a right angle and you walk out in the open for half a second and you just get caught and you're dead, you offer nothing to the team. And if you're a tank that can't play very well and you're very weak at the role, you take no space for your team. It's awful. I prefer the weak support line because you're always able to contribute. I would never want a weak tank, and sometimes with weak DPS, I can sort of get by on support because I'll just go crazy DPS BAP or Alaria or Kiriko. But yeah, definitely would rather have the weak support line as the weakest link because that's the one that's not as noticeable. Is it just me, or is Platinum the new Masters right now? I've been high Masters on DPS for 5 or 6 seasons now, reached GM in Season 8, and this season the level of skill and players populating my high plat to low diamond lobbies feels higher than it ever was. I appreciate the rank reset and the new champion rank, and that has shook things up a bit, but many of these players have hundreds of games and are clearly where matchmaking intends them to be right now. That seems a bit crazy to me, having Platinum and below contain 95% of players, and 3 entire ranks, not including top 500, of only 7 total ranks, reserved exclusively for 5% of players. Should the bell curve not be a little higher up the ladder? As for right now, I'm able to just about maintain low to mid diamond playing at a higher level, a level higher and against opponents better than I ever did in Masters 1 or GM5. Do you guys have similar experiences, or have I just been losing my ability to use my hands? No, you're right. The change to the new rank reset ended up pushing a lot of people closer to the median, and a lot of people who were at your previous skill level are still fighting to stabilize. I will say, right now you say Platinum feels like Masters. I believe in about, if they don't do another reset for another year, in about 10 months, the Platinum right now should feel closer-ish to what previous Masters is, if not low Masters or high Diamond. But yes, the new champion rank and the squishing of the bell curve definitely shook things up. Don't feel discouraged if you're playing in a whole division lower. If you look at the top 500 leaderboard, around 5 weeks into a season, we'd see most people at least GM3, GM2, GM1 to make it into the top 500 leaderboard. And with this season having more players than ever, right? Top 500 is cut off in Masters 1 still. Being in GM3 puts you in top 70 right now. There's like less than 10 champion players per region, per role, except for support on NA. There's a lot of champion players. There's like 12 of them. But like top 70 is up to GM3. GM4 already puts you in top 100. It's absolutely insane. So hitting Grandmaster now is a very, very good accomplishment. If you were able to hit GM5 back in the day and you're currently playing in Platinum and Diamond, it's going to be a long journey. Trust me, I would know. I have hit GM4, almost GM3 this season. I made it to top 66. But I also fell to Diamond right at the beginning, right in like the first week. The first week I placed in Masters 4, climbed up to GM5, and then went on a really bad streak back down to Diamond 1. And I'm like, am I going crazy? Did I forget how to use my hand?
I can't fall to Diamond. Dude, I can't fall to Diamond. This is insane. I have never done this in my life. In 8 years.
I locked in and got back to where at least I feel like I belong, because I've pretty much been top 500 player for like 7 years, since pretty much the beginning of the game. This is totally a self-glazing moment, but I'm just saying this to also not only brag, but to also show you that there is a high level of variance. I recall a lot of those Masters 4, Masters 5, even some of those Diamond 1 games, I'm like, I look at their profile and they were like GM3 in the previous season, GM2, GM1, and I'm like, okay, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be a hard journey, but you're good. You're good. It's not just you. Returning player dies instantly as tank. Bracket Reinhardt. Okay, I'm a returning player, and the last time I played was maybe about a year ago or more. When I queue as Reinhardt, the second I put my shield down, I get instantly annihilated. I'm playing around corners and doing all Ryan things, but I can't put my shield down without falling over within 2 seconds. I think the new Mauga guy is the biggest defender here because he's in every match I play. You guys have any tips for me to play to have better survivability as Ryan in Season 9? How about any tips to counter Mauga? Thanks in advance. Honestly, it's not just you. Reinhardt's in a tough place. With the way all the tanks have shifted, if you're ever caught out in a moment, you don't really have a strong disengage tool. Your disengage is charging out, but charging out has a long windup time, and B, you just get shot if you try to run away. All the other tanks, not all, but a lot of them have disengage tools. For example, Mauga can overrun, Orisa can pop fortify, maybe spin around and get some movement speed. Junkrat Queen can shout and run backwards if needed. Winston can jump out, Ball can roll away. I guess Zarya doesn't have a disengage tool, but she does have some bubbles. And she has a bit of range, right, with the beam and stuff. Roadhog obviously doesn't really have like a true disengage, but he has a bit of range. You can't be within his hook range because that's a space. But Ryan, his deadly space is basically just his melee range. So he has a smaller singular threat in his area, unless he has Earth Shatter, right? So if you're not within that zone, a lot of people are able to take space on him, and he just gets heavily punished. So playing Ryan right now as a tank is really hard. I do think they need to maybe give him a better charge, cut down the wind-up mechanic on the animation, give him some damage reduction on it, or maybe even give him movement speed if he decides to use all his shield and the shield cracks. Make it so it's not as punishing if you do decide to keep your shield up all the way, because a lot of Ryans have to put down their shield right before it cracks. Maybe you can give them a little bit of a movement speed at the expense of not being able to recharge the shield as quickly, so you can actually close the distance a little bit. But Ryan is tough. Tips against Mauga, you got it's hard. You have to literally play cover to cover. You don't even fight Mauga at all, because he's just gonna rip you to shreds, and he's gonna lifesteal off of you if you get in within swing range. So you basically just have to play cover to cover. Pray your team takes the space, and that's the thing with Ryan, and that's why it's so frustrating. You have to pray your team takes advantage of you walking up to Mauga. But Mauga is honestly not even threatened, because he can burn your shield, believe it or not. If he burns your shield, he's doing crit damage to your shield or your barrier, which means it goes down really fast. So yeah, that matchup's hard. I would say, you know, like Ryan is acceptable if everyone's on the same page and makes use of your aggressive space if you do decide to take it. But if you're a little defensive and on the back foot, you'll just fall over. And that's why Ryan feels really frustrating right now. How do you even play Wrecking Ball when Sombra exists? I came back to Overwatch after like 4 years for the sole purpose of playing Ball because it's very fun to me. Okay. I did a few normal games and had a blast, but then ranked, every time I want to play Ball, the enemies just insta-lock Sombra and I'm just worthless. They're just waiting for me to do anything so they can hack me and counter my entire gameplay. Is there any way to play Ball around her? Playing ball against some of your counters like Sombra requires a little bit of finesse. It means you don't just blindly pile drive and slam into their entire team, or else they'll hack you and destroy you and kill you. I think what a lot of good balls do against Sombra is they roll around a little bit, kind of feel out to see if she'll reveal herself. She hasn't already been revealed. Some balls may hide a little bit. You just have to kind of like stage the battlefield a little bit to see if she unstealths and attacks somebody else, or if she's specifically targeting you. Try to get her a bit more isolated, and instead of like committing to a slam and like, you know, going fireball and then slamming because you're gonna get hacked out of the air, you kind of just roll through. If you roll through quick enough and you hit her or collide with her, you will knock her out of it and she can't hack you. Or sometimes I've seen a really good ball, as soon as they notice it, they unball and just actually start shooting her, hopefully in an area where the other team isn't. And you just have to play it a lot different. That's all. Adjustment to the matchup. If you just keep bashing your head and doing the same thing over and over again, isn't that what they call insanity? So yeah, it's an adjustment for sure. If they have multiple counters besides Sombra, then you're gonna run into a lot of problems. But if it's just a Sombra on her own, I feel like a lot of ball players have made the argument that Sombra by herself is actually not as bad to play around. Because yes, the hack is very annoying. It's 1.5 seconds, but you can technically roll away before even she like 100s to zeros you. You have too much HP for her to kill you by herself. It can be annoying to get hacked out of it, but obviously when her whole team jumps on you, that's when you're in trouble. If she hacks you and there's multiple people shooting you. So it's a lot about finesse and game sense there. Blizzard needs to take note of their Pharah rework and give Junkrat something similar. They nailed it here, probably their best rework in my opinion. I play in Masters. Previously, hardly ever touched this hero as it was so dependent on Mercy and so niche. I love the rocket speed change. Junkrat needs this. It made ground Pharah a viable playstyle when you're waiting for cooldowns. Concussive Grenade doing damage opened up some new combos, but mostly it's the change in mobility. Instead of just hovering in the skybox, the new dash and new movement tech with the Concussive Blast makes it so much easier to get in range and actually deal with your counters. I really like the direction they went in general here. Pharah was hard countered by Hitscan previously, and they still kind of do counter her, but she can 100% play around it. Sure, when you're playing against Junk or Mei, you can take sightlines with much less cover and still spam from the air, but when they're running a Soldier or Ashe, you actually have the horizontal mobility and rocket speed to either dash on top of them and blow them up, or spam the angle they're holding on from the floor. Her ult needs like a cancel or something still. Make it work somewhat like Cassidy's. She's not hard meta, she's not oppressive, but she works and is really fun to play right now. And her traditional counters don't absolutely dumpster her as much now, and she still retains her hero fantasy and general playstyle of death from above. Echo and Sombra are extremely difficult to deal with, but I think that is generally healthier than just getting countered and forced to swap by all the hit scans, which are frequent in games. I agree. I have played a little bit of Pharah in quick play recently, and I have to say the Pharah rework was much better than I thought. I don't barely play Pharah. I played mostly Pharah in 2016 when the game first came out, Overwatch 1, and she was my main quick play hero. But that's about it. I haven't played much since. I know how to fly permanently, at least the old version. This new one, the only tricky thing is managing the fuel. But other than that, the direction and the rocket speed change and the horizontal velocity that you get to go on if you do decide to hover is really, really nice. And I do think this rework is literally one small buff away from actually being better than slightly niche right now and a little slightly below average, but certainly not unviable, not oppressive at all right now. And I agree. Blizzard needs to take note of their Pharah rework and give Junkrat something similar. So a smaller rework, is that what you're suggesting? I do have an idea for Junkrat. I guess I'll throw this into the hat. Honestly, I think the Junkrat flank style isn't even that bad. If he's still allowed to one-shot through that, I mean, I found it cheesy when he did it, but it's kind of easier to sniff out, and that's mostly a higher rank, not even a problem, but annoying playstyle to play around, and it wasn't even that bad, because if he messes up the mine in the center, it doesn't confirm the kill. He has to do another shot anyways. So like, I honestly think they could give that back, and to remove the annoyance of the spam, make it so every time the grenade bounces, it does less damage. So right now, most heroes have 250 HP, the nade does 120, the mine does 120 in the center, 240. Not enough to 100 to 0 somebody. But let's just say, if you shoot a grenade in the air, and it doesn't touch a thing, and it hits a direct on a person, it can do 130. And the mine can stay at 120. That means you can 250 one shot combo. When I say one shot, I mean you still have to do two abilities, but two actions, but you know what I mean by one shot. You can still do that, and it rewards you for hitting an air shot. It rewards you for aiming. But if you're just spamming a choke and it just bounces, every bounce reduces the damage by 10. maybe something with diminishing returns, that can be tweaked. So that if you're just spamming mindlessly through a choke, in the lower ranks, it's not as annoying or frustrating to die to that. That's not really a problem at the high ranks, but it alleviates the annoyance in the low ranks, and it rewards higher skill Junkrats for landing those air shots or their directs. Anyways, I need junk mains to comment on that one. What do you think? Next, does Sombra counter Cassidy, or am I just dumb? What the title says. I'm a Cass Ana main. I swear there's nothing more annoying than Sombra. Being invisible, being able to cancel my abilities with such a short cooldown, and the virus is super frustrating to play against. I know from playing Ana the most secure way is to stick with your team, but whenever I'm trying to flank, I constantly find myself 1v1ing her and she either kills me or runs away. I try to stick the nade into her, but she always teleports away before it sticks. That thing sucks, by the way. And then the fact that Cass has a somewhat wide hitbox doesn't help to dodge her attacks, especially when I'm hacked. So does Sombra counter Cassidy, or am I just being an idiot for not knowing how to kill her? And if I'm the idiot, what strategy should I use to fight against her that aren't sticking to the group? And I mean more in a 1v1 situation. No, I don't think Sombra counters Cassidy at all. If you do land the hinder nade, it stops her from flying away. You are 275 HP. Virus only does what? 25 on impact? Maybe 50 if they crit, and 150 over time. You can mitigate some of that damage by rolling, A. B, High Noon also does mitigate some of the damage. And if you hear her, if you literally hear the hack, just chuck the grenade at her. If it and you said it you said it in your post yourself. If you throw it and she teleports away, that's good. You made her disengage, and then you're playing at a better range for yourself, because if she throws her translocator to dodge your nade, you're playing at mid range, which means you can still do your full damage. But Sombra has a lot of spread, and she probably can't complete the kill on you. That's already good. So I would say, obviously it's a skill matchup. If the Sombra dodges the hinder nade or the magnetic grenade, good for her, but then you also have to worry about the range. And if you're a Cassidy, you just simply have to land your shots. Landing a single body shot will probably force her to run away. And she's crazy for playing up close to you, knowing that she can get hindered. So she's usually playing around mid range. So it just, at the end of the day, in a 1v1 situation, it's mostly a skill issue. Yeah, I would say you just have to hit her in the face. The matchup is definitely not in Sombra's favor by any stretch. You players that are able to hop in the practice range for 10 minutes and completely warm up, how do you do it? I'm pretty sure that I'm not in the norm when it comes to warming up. It typically takes me 5 to 6 games minimum before I feel like my mechanics are where they need to be. 5 to 6 games. Most nights I'll end up too tired to get into the mindset of playing comp by the time I feel like I'm warmed up. I consider myself to have very good aim and decent movement, but it seems like I start from square one each day for the first few matches. Maybe this is attributed to the fact that Overwatch 2 was my first mouse and keyboard multiplayer game, but I also have almost 2,000 hours now. I just want to know if there's anybody out there with a similar experience that can give me advice. I think it's more of a mental blockade. You feel like your aim gets better over time, which arguably it does in a lot of cases. After being 1 or 2 hours deep, you'll feel a lot better because you've literally been playing the game. You get in the zone, in the groove. But I would honestly just say, just play the game to warm up. Like, I just queue comp and I warm up for 5-10 minutes exactly how you say, and just go in, right? You say, how do I do it? I don't, I just play. Aim is not even the most important thing. You know what I mean? A lot of people think they're not warm because they can't hit their shots, but you don't have to play heroes that have to hit their shots all the time. Unless you're true hit scan and you're really feeling off on Widow, just play as more forgiving projectile heroes. Maybe a little bit of Hanzo, or even a little bit of Mei. There's other ways to pop off, if that makes any sense. Yeah, just simply just warm up and comp. That's it. And honestly, 5 to 6 games, you say you're too tired at the end. 5 to 6 games is a lot for an average casual person. Obviously, I'm a streamer, content creator. I'm allowed to play like long 6 to 8, 10-hour sessions. But your average schmo, Joe Schmo, working, a 12-hour shift, coming home, cracking open a beer, smoking some weed, and wanting to play a few games before bed. Who cares if you're warm or not? Just play to have fun. It's definitely just in your mind. You're probably warmer than you actually think, and if you can break out of that mindset, you'll probably play just as well as before. It's probably not going to be the game-changing factor in your matches. It's mostly your decision making and your macro and your positioning and your strategy and your staging, all in your movement. All those things don't really need warming up. It's just aim, and that's one of like the 15 to 20 skills you need in Overwatch to play well. Why swap to a hero that pops off? In games, I've commonly seen people switch to another character to beat another character. For example, the enemy tank is Doom or Diva, you go Orisa or Zarya or something. Basic counter swaps. But why on occasion I see people go out of their way to swap to the same hero the enemy has when they pop off? Let's say you got a soldier, they just got a 5k, and the enemy team comes back with another soldier. Why? Is it to match them in some capacity? I can't understand that, but sometimes I can't. Like I've seen a Zarya and Orisa switch to D.Va when a D.Va pops off, or Doom or Ryan or whatever that counter matchup. I don't get this. Is it because they realize the counter isn't working? Is it ego? Even though they might be objectively worse than the hero, they still play it. This isn't just for tanks. I've seen with DPS and supports too. It's weird to me. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's just ego, but I got 500 hours, so if y'all are more experienced, let me know this. Okay, so you're saying if the enemy team pops off on a hero, your team tends to swap to the mirror matchup. One part of me does think it's a little bit of ego. That's like the psychological aspect of it. You think you can match them. If it's a Widow popping off or a Tracer popping off, you swap to that to match them and see if you can diff them. It's a personal challenge and a psychology thing. That's number one. But number two, and from a strategic standpoint, it's actually not even that bad of an idea. If they're playing well and you mirror it, you can sort of have presence because you kind of do the same job in the same role. So you're going to be meeting them halfway. And even if you're a worse player on that hero compared to them, you're doing enough to slow down their momentum. So you're saying the enemy is popping off. If you stick on that hero, your hero previously, and they're just rolling your team, you're probably going to lose the game anyway. So why not swap to a mirror and do your best to slow them down? For example, if their Tracer is popping off, you can just play a Tracer as well, even if you're not great at it, and just mark her, follow her around, annoy her so she can't do what she was doing before, because obviously it was working before. Same with Widowmaker. If Widowmaker is just uncontested and owning your team non-stop, a lot of people will just swap to another Widow. One, for the ego Widow duel, and two, if the Widow is shooting for free, at least she knows she can't stand still and continue to shoot your team as long as she's aware that there's another Widow, your presence, and that can slow down her angles and position she wants to take, right? And number three, for the Reinhardt versus Reinhardt mirror specifically, that's just for honor. That happens no matter what. That's ego. Last question of the week. Is it worth playing Kiriko as somebody with bad kunai aim? To preface, I am not good with aiming, partially because of myself as somebody who has bad reaction speeds, and another due to me using half of a small mouse pad. Long story. So my sensitivity is naturally high on a character that demands a really low one. Generally don't have issues tracking Ofuda. Not to say I'm great, but I do believe I'll get used to tracking with it. Doesn't seem something like out of my reach, but that's not what separates a good Kiriko from bad Kiriko. It's whether you can headshot duel with her, which I can't. I disagree. I don't even think it's a headshot duel that separates a good and bad Kiriko, but I'll keep reading. It kind of hurts watching guys on Kiriko with all those mains straight up outdueling everyone and everything with 2 taps, while I consider hitting a single headshot a luck roll, let alone 2 in a row. Because of that, I mostly just heal bot on her. Occasionally I'll throw out my kunais at choke points at about head level. Even if it won't kill somebody, it's usually enough for them to retreat back behind cover, as they'll be heavily wounded. See what you just mentioned there? That's good. That's what you should do and can do as a big option. And maybe even get a pick on a stationary sniper. But when it comes to, say, a DPS flanking me, I usually throw out my kunais. I realize I hit mostly body shots, and once low, I just escape with swift step. Granted, there were a few times where I did 2-tap somebody, but I count those as mostly a luck roll rather than my actual expression of skill. So is it worth continuing playing Kiriko with bad kunai aim, or should I just switch my main to somebody else? Okay, easy answer is yes. You should still continue to play Kiriko with bad kunai aim, even if you have limited mouse pad space. There are players who can play on really high sense and still pop off. The only way to get better at something is to continue to do it, and to continue playing it, and to continue practice and honing your skills on that hero. You can't get better at Kiriko if you never play Kiriko, right? So I would say yes, it's still worth it. And number two, if you're stuck on the small mouse pad, that's unfortunate. I have a really big one, I will say. But a high sensitivity isn't going to actually make or break it. Believe it or not, a lot of what I consider aiming on Kiriko, especially at the head level, is actually my own movement keys rather than my mouse movement. So let me give you an example. When you go up on Esperanza on your first bridge, and the enemy team, if they play Kiriko, or people, they go on the opposite, that first bridge around the first point where the push robot is. That's a great area for all you need to do, even with your limited mouse pad space. Keep your kunais, your crosshair at head level, and all you need to do is use your own movement keys, the AD, don't jump, and just spam. And use your movement keys as you're aiming, if that makes any sense. Because I'm strafing, naturally my kunais are not going to go to the same spot, because you're basically matching them, because they'll probably move a little bit as well. And then as long as your crosshairs are on the same head level and you're on the same elevation as an enemy, you never need to move your mouse on the Y axis. You pretty much keep it on the x-axis, and maybe some micro adjustments with your wrist a little bit as needed with your movement keys. But I will say a majority of my aim is done through my movement. My own movement moves my crosshair, micro adjustments on the x-axis, and that's that. In the occasional time that you do get flanked in those duels, yes, you're gonna need a little bit of a finesse to hopefully get some of those headshots. A lot of times, because they're closer to you and they tend to jump or whatever, you do have to like be ready to like aim up, and that anticipation helps a lot in quick 1v1 duels up close. But number 2, you can still play very well as Kiriko by just, you know, popping, heal botting per se, and spamming some kunais in between your heals. That doesn't require, that's not a mouse pad space limitation. That's just a mechanical rhythm where you just hold the heals, throw a kunai or two, throw your heals, kunai or two. And then don't be afraid to even go up there and climb up the walls and take some cheeky off angles. Even if you're not confident in hitting the shot, you said even if you hit a body shot, heavily wounding them is pressure, and pressuring enemies in these staging and poking phases forces them to use cooldowns and bad opportunities and messes with their tempo, and that is very important as Kiriko. You can do that even with bad aim. Don't have to hit the head. Take off strong angles, positional. That's from your mind, not your mouse pad. Hit them in the body a few times, and then when you're in trouble, TP out. It's a free get out of jail free card, and that's why Kiriko is so good, because you can pressure from so many different places. So this is probably like something you'll finesse over time with kunai aim, but there's so many other aspects of Kiriko you can still improve on and get better at and still play very well on. So that's my advice. All right, hopefully that answers all the questions of the week. Thank you for watching. See you next week.